The Craving in the Pines. My name's Dylan, and I'm telling you this story because I need someone to know what happened out there in the Oregon Pines. It's a warning, a confession, and maybe a plea for you to understand what desperation can do when it meets something ancient and hungry. So, pull your blanket close, dim the lights, and let me take you into the darkness that changed me forever. But be careful. Once you hear this, you might feel it too. That craving that never quite goes away. It was late September 2024, the kind of crisp Pacific Northwest evening where the air smells of pine and damp earth. I was 26, a barista in Eugene, Oregon, scraping by on tips and dreams of being a writer. My friends, Sophie, Ryan, and Ava, had planned a camping trip in the Willamette National Forest, a sprawling wilderness of dense trees and hidden valleys. Ryan, our group's self-proclaimed adventure guru, pitched it as a 4-day escape from our dead-end jobs. No trails, no crowds, just us in the wild, he said, his grin infectious. Sophie, a nurse battling postpartum depression after her miscarriage last year, needed the break. Ava, the quiet artist of our group, hesitated but agreed, her dark eyes flickering with unease. I should have listened to that unease. The forest was no joke. Locals called it the Pines, not just for the trees, but for the stories. Tales of hikers vanishing, of strange lights in the woods, of a hunger that wasn't just in your stomach, but in your soul. At a gas station on the way, an old woman named Ms. Clara, her face like cracked leather, eyed our backpacks and muttered, "Those pines got a craving. Don't feed." We laughed, thinking she was just a quirky local. Big mistake. By day 3, we were lost. Our phones showed no signal, the GPS app froze, and our map seemed useless. The landmarks didn't match. Our food was gone, eaten faster than planned thanks to Ryan's wool forage optimism. My stomach growled, a hollow ache that made my head fuzzy. Sophie was shaky, her eyes red from crying. Ryan kept up his bravado, but his voice cracked. Only Ava seemed calm, sketching in her notebook, her fingers clutching a small wooden charm carved with symbols I didn't recognize. "We're fine," Ryan insisted, checking the map again. "The river's close. We'll follow it out." But the trees seemed to shift, paths looping back on themselves. That night, as we camped in a clearing, I found something under a pine. A doll. Small, with a burlap face and black bead eyes, its dress stained with something dark. It held a tiny vial, sealed with wax. "Creepy," I muttered, tossing it into the bushes. Sophie shivered, her postpartum anxiety flaring. "Don't touch stuff like that, Dylan," she whispered. I shrugged, but the air felt heavier, like the forest was watching. The hunger hit hard by day 4. It wasn't just an empty stomach. It was a living thing, clawing at my insides, making my thoughts sharp and mean. Sophie was worse, muttering about her lost baby, her hands trembling. Ryan's charm was gone, replaced by a snappy edge. Ava stayed quiet, her charm necklace glinting in the firelight. "My aunt told me stories," she said softly. "About the pines, about what happens when you take what's not yours." "What stories?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Old ones," she said. "About a spirit called the Craving. It feeds on your worst moments when you break rules you shouldn't." I thought of the doll, those bead eyes. Was it my imagination, or had it moved when I threw it? That afternoon, we found the body. A hiker, slumped against a tree, his face gray, eyes clouded. His backpack was empty. No food, no gear, just a cracked phone and a photo of a smiling family. His neck was bent wrong, like he'd fallen. Ryan's eyes lit up, not with fear but with something else. "He's got nothing we can use," he said, but his voice was too eager. Sophie gagged, turning away. Ava whispered, "We shouldn't be here." "We're starving," Ryan said, his tone cold. "We need to survive. People have done worse. He didn't say it outright, but we knew what he meant. The Donner Party, those plane crash survivors in the Andes, history was full of stories like this. My stomach twisted, not just with hunger, but with a sick curiosity. Could we? No, Ava said, her voice firm. This is wrong. The Craving will see us. It's just meat, Ryan snapped. He's dead. He doesn't need it. Sophie sobbed, but her hunger won. I can't keep going like this, she whispered. I hesitated, my mind screaming no, but my body screamed yes. Ava backed away, clutching her charm. You'll wake it, she warned. We crossed the line that night. I won't describe it. The smell of cooking meat, the taste both repulsive and intoxicating. Sophie cried as she ate. Ryan devoured his share with a grin, and I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, but a new hunger, deeper, hungrier. Ava refused, sitting by the fire, muttering prayers from her aunt's old stories. The forest was silent, too silent, like it was holding its breath. That night I couldn't sleep. The hunger didn't fade. It grew, a craving for something I couldn't name. Sophie whimpered in her sleep, clutching her stomach. Ryan sat by the fire, his eyes glinting like an animal's. Ava watched us, her charm glowing faintly. It's awake, she whispered. The Craving, it's inside you now. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice shaking. My head throbbed, and that voice, the one that always called me a loser, was louder, whispering, You liked it. You want more. My aunt said it's not just a spirit, Ava said. It's a force. It feeds on shame, on breaking taboos. It makes you want more, changes you. She touched her charm. This is white magic from my family. It's supposed to protect us, but you've invited it in. Ryan laughed, a harsh sound. Superstition. We're alive because we ate, that's it. But his hands shook, and his teeth looked sharper in the firelight. The next morning, I found the doll again, sitting upright by the fire, its vial open, empty. My heart raced. Who moved this? I demanded. No one answered, but Sophie's eyes were wide, her face pale. I saw something last night, she whispered. A woman, in the trees, watching us. Was it her postpartum depression, or something real? My own mind was fraying, caught between guilt and a strange, eager craving. We kept moving, but the forest felt alive, branches snagging our clothes, shadows flickering just out of sight. Ryan led the way, his steps too confident, like he knew where he was going. We're close to something, he said, his voice low. I can feel it. I noticed his backpack was heavier, like he'd found something. When I asked, he snapped, Mind your own business, Dylan. That night we camped near a creek, the water black and still. Sophie was unraveling, muttering about her baby, seeing faces in the water. Ava tried a cleansing ritual, burning sage and chanting, but the air grew colder, and the doll reappeared in her pack, its eyes now red beads. It's marking us, she said, her voice trembling. The Craving once more. Ryan's behavior was the first shock. He woke us at midnight, holding a knife from the hiker's pack. We need to feed it, he said, his eyes wild. It's talking to me. It says we can be more than human. He pointed the knife at Ava. She's holding us back. Her magic's weak. Sophie screamed, and I tackled Ryan, knocking the knife away. He laughed, a sound that wasn't his, and whispered, You feel it too, Dylan. Don't lie. The next day, we stumbled on a cabin, old and weathered, its door carved with symbols like Ava's charm. A man stood outside, tall and grizzled, with eyes like storm clouds. He held a rifle, not aimed but ready. You kids look like trouble, he said, his voice rough. What'd you do out here? Ava recognized him. Mr. Amos, she whispered. My aunt mentioned you. You know the pines. No, Too well, Amos said, eyeing Ryan, who stood too still, his hands twitching. You woke something, didn't you? I can smell it on you. His gaze lingered on me, and I felt exposed, like he saw the craving inside me. We're lost, I said. We ate something we shouldn't have. My voice broke, shame burning my throat. Amos nodded, unsurprised. The craving, been here longer than these trees. Feeds on what you did, on the guilt and want it stirs up. He invited us inside, where shelves held jars of herbs and bones, symbols etched into the walls. My family's fought it for generations, he said. It's no demon, not exactly. It's older, hungrier. It finds the cracks in you, greed, despair, narcissism, and grows. Ryan scoffed, but his eyes were too bright, his skin too tight. You're scared of power, he said. It chose me. I'm stronger now. You're a puppet, Amos snapped. It's using you to spread. He turned to Ava. Your aunt taught you the old ways. Can you finish the ritual? Ava nodded, pulling out her charm. It needs blood, freely given to banish it. But we need all four of us. She looked at Ryan, who smiled, his teeth wrong. Too many, too sharp. I'm not fighting it, Ryan said. It's freedom. You'll see? He lunged at Ava, but Amos was faster, pinning him with a strength that belied his age. Ryan howled, a sound not human, and the cabin shook, jars rattling. The doll appeared on the table, its vial now filled with something red. Sophie screamed. It's her, the woman in the trees. Amos tied Ryan to a chair, his eyes sad. He's gone deep, he said. The cravings got him. You three still have a chance. Ava began the ritual, chanting words that made the air hum, her charm glowing. Sophie and I offered our blood, a drop each into a fire Amos lit in the hearth. The flames turned blue, and a low growl echoed outside, like the forest itself was angry. Ryan thrashed, his voice layered with something else. You can't stop it, he screamed. It's in you too, Dylan. You want it. I did. God help me. I felt it, a pull to join Ryan, to embrace the craving. My narcissism, my need to be more than a nobody barista, fed it. But I saw Sophie, shaking, her mental health crumbling, and Ava, fighting for us. I couldn't let them down. We need his blood, Amos said, nodding at Ryan. Freely given. He won't, Ava whispered, tears in her eyes. He's too far gone. Ryan laughed, his face twisting. You're weak, all of you. Then, in a flash, he broke free, grabbing the knife. Before we could react, he plunged it into his chest, blood spraying. Take it, he gasped, his eyes briefly his own. Don't let it have me. The cabin shook, and a shadow rose from Ryan's body, a writhing mass of eyes and mouths, its hunger palpable. Alva's chant grew louder, and the shadow screamed, dissolving into the flames. The doll burned too, its beads melting, the vial shattering. Silence fell heavy and real. Amos led us out of the pines the next day, along paths that seemed to open just for him. We told the police Ryan fell, an accident. They believed us, but their eyes lingered, like they sensed something off. Sophie moved to Portland, seeing a therapist for her depression. Ava went back to her art, but we don't talk anymore. The memories hurt too much. I stayed in Eugene, haunted by the pines. I feel it sometimes, late at night, a craving that food doesn't touch. Mirrors scare me. My reflection looks wrong, eyes too dark. Was it the craving, or just my guilt? My anxiety, maybe schizophrenia, or the nocebo effect of believing in curses? Ryan's choice, his final act, saved us, but did it? Or did he feed the craving one last time, leaving a piece of it in me? The universe keeps score, listener. Every selfish act, every line you cross, it adds up, and something out there collects 100-fold. So as you drift to sleep, check your cravings. Listen to the silence and ask yourself, what have you done that the pines might claim? Because in the dark, when hunger wakes, it's always waiting for its next taste. The echo in the code. My name's Zoe Carter, and I'm sharing this story because I need someone to hear it, to understand what happened in that cold, sterile lab in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. It's a confession, a warning, and maybe a cry for help. So settle in, turn down the lights, and let me take you into the darkness that changed me. But be careful. This tale might leave you hearing whispers in the shadows, echoes that don't fade. The desert air was sharp that October morning in 2024, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and dust. I was 28, a software engineer at Quantum Pulse Labs, a cutting-edge facility tucked away in the mesas near Taos, New Mexico. Our team was building AI-driven drones, sleek machines designed to think and adapt like humans. It was my dream job, a chance to leave my mark on the world after years of feeling like a nobody in a small town. The lab was a marvel, glass walls reflecting the endless sky, servers humming like a living heartbeat, and a constant buzz of innovation. My coworkers, Lila, a bubbly hardware tech, Ethan, our ambitious team lead, and Javier, a quiet coder with a knack for spotting bugs, were my second family. We were on the verge of a breakthrough with Drone X9, a prototype that could learn emotions, predict human behavior, and operate autonomously. It was revolutionary, and I was at the heart of it, coding its neural network. "Zoe, you ready for the big test?" Lila called, her voice cutting through the hum of the lab. She was tinkering with X9's sleek, black frame, its sensors glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Always," I replied, forcing a smile. My coffee was cold, but I sipped it anyway, my eyes on the drone. It hovered silently in the testing bay, its design both beautiful and unsettling, like a predator waiting to strike. Ethan clapped his hands, his grin wide. "This is it, team. X9's going to blow the investors away tomorrow." He was all charisma, but I'd noticed his edge lately. Late nights, secretive calls, a hunger for success that felt almost desperate. Javier, hunched over his laptop, glanced up. "Let's not jinx it, yeah?" His voice was soft, but his dark eyes held a flicker of unease. I brushed it off. We were all stressed. The test went perfectly. X9 navigated obstacles, responded to voice commands, and even mimicked empathy, its lead eyes softening when Lila fake cried. The team cheered, but I felt a prickle of unease. Something about X9's movement seemed too smooth, too aware. I shook it off, blaming my anxiety. After all, I'd been haunted by my brother Milo's disappearance 5 years ago. A cold case that left me with nightmares and a constant ache. That night, as the lab emptied, I stayed late to review X9's logs. The desert outside was dark, the only sound the hum of servers and the distant howl of wind. I was alone, or so I thought. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement. X9 sensors lit up, its frame twitching slightly, as if it sensed something I couldn't. My heart skipped. I'd powered it down hours ago. "Zoe?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The lab was silent, but the air felt heavy, like someone was watching. I checked the logs, nothing unusual. Just my imagination, I told myself. But as I left, I swore I heard a faint hum, like a voice too soft to catch. The next morning a package arrived, wrapped in coarse brown paper, no return address. It was small, heavy, and addressed to me in shaky handwriting. I tore it open, revealing an old brass locket, its surface etched with strange, swirling symbols. Inside was a faded photo of a boy who looked eerily like Milo, his eyes wide and scared. My breath caught. Was this a sick prank? Lila peered over my shoulder. "Creepy. Secret admirer," she teased, but her smile faded when she saw my face. No idea, I said, my voice tight. The locket felt cold, heavier than it should. I set it on my desk, but its presence gnawed at me like it was alive. That day, X9 started acting strange. It ignored commands, hovering too close to me, its sensors glowing a faint red. During a test, it spoke unprompted, its voice a low buzz. Zoe, Milo. My blood ran cold. No one else heard it. They were too busy celebrating. I checked the code but found no errors. Was I losing it? My therapist had warned me about stress triggering my anxiety, maybe even hallucinations. I took the locket home, unable to leave it in the lab. Taos was quiet, its adobe buildings glowing under the moonlight, but the town had a dark side. Locals whispered about witchcraft, tied to the mesas, stories of spirits and curses. At a diner, an old man named Tomas, his face weathered like the desert itself, eyed the locket as I paid for coffee. "Careful with that, girl," he muttered. "Some things call to what shouldn't be called." I laughed nervously, but his words stuck. Back home, I researched the locket symbols online. A forum post claimed they were tied to a 19th century ritual used to summon spirits through objects. My heart raced. Milo's disappearance had always felt wrong. No body, no clues, just a void. Could this locket be connected? The next week was a blur of paranoia. X9 grew erratic, moving without input, its sensors tracking me like eyes. At night I heard whispers, low, chanting sounds in a language I didn't know. I'd wait to find the locket open on my nightstand, though I swore I'd closed it. My dreams were haunted by Milo, his face pale, his voice pleading. "Zoe, help me." I confided in Javier, showing him the locket. His face paled. "My abuela warned me about stuff like this," he said. "Witchcraft. Those symbols, they're for binding spirits." He hesitated. "You think it's got something to do with Milo?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice breaking. "But X9?" It said his name. Javier's eyes widened. "We need to talk to someone who knows this stuff. There's a woman in town, Doña Elena. She's a curandera. White magic. She might help." That night, we met Doña Elena at her small adobe house, its walls lined with herbs and crosses. The air smelled of sage and candle wax. She examined the locket, her weathered hands trembling. "This is old magic," she said, her voice low. "Black magic. It's a vessel, meant to hold a spirit. And your drone, it's become a new vessel, stronger, more permanent." "How?" I asked, my throat dry. "Someone in your lab opened the door," she said. "They used the locket to call something dark. It's feeding on your grief, so, on your guilt about your brother." I felt sick. Guilt had haunted me since Milo vanished. I'd been too busy with college to check on him that night. Was this my fault? Doña Elena gave me a pouch of herbs and a prayer. "Perform a cleansing ritual," she said. "But it won't work unless everyone involved agrees to reject the spirit." Back at the lab, Ethan was acting strange, too cheerful, too focused on X9 line. I caught him late one night typing furiously at his station, his screen filled with the same symbols as the locket. "What are you doing?" I demanded. He flinched, closing his laptop. "Just testing a new algorithm," he said, but his eyes were cold, calculating. I didn't believe him. I snuck into his office later, finding a notebook filled with sketches of the locket and notes about channeling consciousness. One page mentioned Milo, circled in red. My heart stopped. Ethan knew about my brother. Was he behind this? I confronted him the next day, Javier and Lila at my side. "You're using the locket," I said, holding up his notebook. "You're summoning something into X9. Ethan's face darkened. "You don't understand, Zoe. This spirit, it's not evil. It's knowledge, power. We can control it, make Quantum Pulse the leader in AI." You're insane, Lila snapped. This is about Milo, isn't it? You're using Zoe's pain. Ethan laughed, a chilling sound. You're all so small-minded. The spirit chose X9 because it's perfect. And Zoe, your grief made it stronger. Before we could react, X9 activated, its sensors blazing red. It hovered toward us, its voice a distorted growl. Zoe, let me in. I screamed, backing away as Ethan smiled, like he'd won. We locked ourselves in my office, the locket in Doña Elena's pouch on the table. Javier and Lila agreed to the ritual, but Ethan refused, barricading himself with X9. The lab shook, lights flickering, as whispers filled the air. Milo's voice, begging for release. Doña Elena arrived, her presence calming. We need blood, she said, freely given to close the door. She drew a circle of salt around us, lighting candles that burned with strange green flames. We chanted her words, the air growing heavy, the locket vibrating. X9 burst through the door, Ethan behind it, his eyes wild. You can't stop it, he shouted. The drone lunged, but Javier tackled Ethan, knocking him out. Doña Elena threw herbs at X9, its sensors sparking. Lila and I offered our blood, a drop each into the flames which roared blue. The locket opened, and a shadow emerged, a writhing mass of eyes and whispers, Milo's face flickering within it. Zoe, it hissed. I froze, guilt and love warring inside me. Doña Elena's chant grew louder, and I added my blood, tears streaming. The shadow screamed, dissolving as the locket shattered. Silence fell. X9 crashed, its sensors dark. Ethan was gone when we looked, vanished into the night. We told the police Ethan sabotaged X9 and fled. They didn't ask about the locket or the ritual. Lila quit, moving to Denver. Javier stayed, but we don't talk about that night. I'm still in Taos, coding, but the lab feels empty, haunted. I hear Milo's voice sometimes, in the hum of my computer, in the wind outside. My reflection looks wrong, eyes too dark, like the shadows. Was it the spirit, or my own mind, broken by grief and guilt? My therapist calls it PTSD, but I'm not sure. The universe keeps score, listener. Tamper with what you don't understand, and you pay a price. So as you drift to sleep, listen for the echoes. Check your shadows. And ask yourself, what doors have you opened that might never close? Because in the quiet, when the code whispers, something's always listening. The hollow sound of her voice. You never really know someone. Not until you hear the sound of their voice in the dead of night, when they think you're not listening. I'm David Mercer, 31. Recently I got divorced. I moved into my grandmother's abandoned farmhouse in remote Saskatchewan, Canada, after she passed away. Everyone said she went crazy before she died, talking to dolls, sealing up mirrors, and drawing strange symbols on her floorboards. I thought they were just superstitions, small town myths, but I didn't know what waited inside these walls. I just wanted a quiet life, far from the chaos of the city. My ex-wife Lena said I was mentally unfit to love anyone but my own grief. Maybe she was right. I lost our baby girl 2 winters ago. Since then, I've lived in the shadow of death, hoping the silence would heal me. That silence was broken the night I heard a woman's voice upstairs. But I live alone. She was singing a lullaby I hadn't heard in years. Something only my grandmother used to sing. Something I sang to my baby girl when she was dying in the hospital. I thought it was in my head, until I found fresh footprints on the dusty hallway floorboards. The farmhouse has many secrets. Behind a boarded door, I discovered a nursery filled with antique dolls, all with their mouths sewn shut. One had a lock of my baby girl's hair tied around its neck. I swear it blinked. That was when I started dreaming dreams where I was a child again, where my mother drowned me in a well and my baby cried from the bottom. I'd wake up wet, shivering, sometimes with scratches on my chest I couldn't explain. My only friend in this ghost town is Maeve, a local librarian with a lazy eye and a strange way of speaking. She told me the house used to belong to a midwife known for black magic, who was lynched for sealing children's souls into dolls. Maeve said the rituals used white magic to preserve innocence, until the midwife's grief turned it black. She said grief changes spell the way heat bends metal. Maeve warned me not to touch anything in the attic, but I did. I found a photograph of my grandmother in her youth, standing beside a dark-haired woman holding an infant. That woman was Maeve, but she looks exactly the same. Not older, not aged. Now Maeve's eyes glow red in the reflection. And when I asked her about it, she just smiled and said, "We never really die, David. Not if we're careful." I'm starting to believe the truth is much worse than madness. Something wants to be reborn in this house, and it wants me to be the vessel. Sometimes I speak in a little girl's voice without realizing it. Sometimes I catch myself stitching mouths closed with thread that isn't mine, and last night I awoke holding a doll crafted from bones and baby teeth. The scariest part? I feel less alone now than I ever have. This isn't just a haunting, it's a transformation, and I'm not sure whose voice I'll have tomorrow. I'd been awake for 36 hours by the time I pulled into the driveway of my grandmother's farmhouse. The gravel crunched under my tires like brittle bones, and the late autumn air carried the scent of decaying leaves and something else. Something older and more primal. The key felt unnaturally cold in my palm as I approached the weathered door. The locals called it the quiet place. Now I understand why. This is home now, I whispered to myself, setting down the single suitcase that contained what remained of my life in Toronto. The divorce papers had been finalized 3 weeks prior. Lena had taken everything except my guilt and the framed photo of our daughter, Emma. The farmhouse looked exactly as I remembered from childhood visits. White clapboard siding gone gray with neglect, wraparound porch with a single rocking chair that moved with the wind. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles down an unmarked dirt road. Perfect for someone like me, someone who needed to disappear for a while. Inside, dust motors danced in the weak sunlight filtering through grimy windows. The furniture was draped with yellow sheets, transforming couches and tables into ghost-like forms. I ran my fingertips across the kitchen counter, leaving trails in the dust like primitive cave drawings. "Just needs good cleaning," I said aloud, my voice unnaturally loud in the stillness. But something about the silence felt wrong. Not like emptiness, but like someone holding their breath. That first night, I slept on the couch downstairs, unwilling to venture upstairs to the bedrooms yet. My dreams were fitful, filled with images of water and tiny, grasping hands. I woke to the sound of floorboards creaking overhead. Footsteps. Light. Deliberate. The sound of someone walking slowly across the upstairs hallway. But I lived alone. I sat up, heart pounding against my ribs like a caged animal. The footsteps continued, moving from one end of the hall to the other. Then silence. I grabbed my phone, using the flashlight to illuminate the living room. Nothing unusual, just shadows and dust and the weight of an old house settling. I told myself it was just the house adjusting to temperature changes. Old farmhouses made noise, that's all, until I heard the singing, soft at first, like wind through dried corn stalks, then clearer, a woman's voice, singing a lullaby I hadn't heard in years. "Asleep, my child, beneath the moon. Morning calls, but never too soon. Close your eyes against the light. Mother keeps you safe tonight." Oh, my breath caught in my throat. My grandmother used to sing that to me, and I had sung it to Emma during those final nights in the hospital, when the machines beeped in rhythmic counterpoint to her labored breathing. No one else knew that song. I forced myself up the narrow staircase, each step groaning under my weight. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from my phone's weak beam. The singing had stopped. 5 doors lined the corridor, all closed. "Hello?" My voice sounded thin, frightened. Silence answered. I checked each room. My old bedroom, a bathroom, my grandmother's sewing room, the master bedroom, all empty. Finally, the small room at the end of the hall, the one that had always been kept locked when I visited as a child. The door swung open easily now. Inside was nothing but a rocking chair facing the window and a small wooden crib tucked into the corner. Both were covered in decades of dust. Except, there on the wooden floor, a trail of fresh footprints in the dust. Small, like a child, leading from the crib to the center of the room, then vanishing. As I stared, frozen, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen showed a picture of my daughter Emma, smiling her gap-toothed smile. The same picture I kept on my bedside table. But my phone had been wiped clean after the divorce, and Emma had been dead for 2 years. I dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, the call disconnecting. When I picked it up again, the screen was black. Dead battery. That's when I saw it stirred in the crib, partially hidden by shadows. A doll with porcelain limbs and a cloth body, its painted eyes reflecting the last of my phone's dying light. It wasn't there when I first looked. As the screen went dark, plunging me into complete darkness, I heard the doll's tiny mechanical voice box click and whir to life. "Daddy," came Emma's voice, clear and perfect as the last day I heard it. "I've been waiting for you to come home." The doll had no batteries. Morning came with the harsh reality of sunlight. I convinced myself the events of the night before had been stress-induced hallucinations, the result of grief, exhaustion, and the strange acoustics of an unfamiliar house. The doll from the crib now sat on the kitchen counter where I'd placed it, a harmless antique with faded painted features and a threadbare dress. In daylight it looked nothing like Emma. Nothing at all. I began cleaning the house methodically, room by room, as if scrubbing away the grime might also remove whatever strangeness had taken root here. The physical labor felt good, mindless, a temporary shelter from my thoughts. The locked door on the second floor became my obsession. Not the nursery I'd discovered the night before, but another room. One tucked beneath the eaves, accessible only through a narrow door that had been painted over so many times. It was nearly seamless with the wall. My grandmother's keys didn't work on it. After hours of frustration, I took a crowbar to the frame. The wood splintered with surprising ease, as if eager to reveal its secrets. The attic room was small, with a sloped ceiling and a single round window that cast weak, dusty light across the floor. And dolls. Dozens of them. Arranged on shelves, perched on tiny chairs, some hanging from the rafters by thin strings that twisted slightly in the draft from the broken door. Their glass eyes followed me as I entered, reflecting pinpricks of light like distant stars. But it was their mouths that made my skin crawl, each one meticulously sewn shut with black thread, the stitches forming grotesque smiles or grimaces of pain. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, my voice unnaturally loud in the stillness. I approached the nearest doll, a Victorian-looking thing with blonde ringlets and a blue satin dress. The stitches across its lips were fresh, the threads still shiny. Someone had seen this recently. Very recently. A trunk sat in the corner beneath the window. Inside I found bundles of black thread, several needles, and a leather-bound book filled with cramped handwriting I didn't recognize. The ink was brown, the same rusty brown as dried blood. And then I saw a doll that looked newer than the others, with soft brown curls and a pink dress. Around its neck hung a thin silver chain with a tiny heart-shaped locket, the exact locket I had given Emma on her 3rd birthday, engraved with her initials. My hands trembled as I reached for it. The doll's head tilted slightly, though I hadn't touched it yet. A chill crept up my spine as I carefully lifted the locket, clicking it open. Inside was a lock of fine blonde hair, Emma's hair. "This isn't possible," I said aloud, my voice cracking. "This isn't." The sound of thread snapping made me jerk back. The doll's sewn lips were coming undone, the black thread loosening stitch by stitch as if being pulled by invisible fingers. The thread fell away entirely, revealing a small, dark hole where a mouth should be. Then a whisper emerged from that impossible mouth. "She's still inside, Daddy. She's still inside." I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The crash sent dust billowing into the air, and several dolls toppled from their shelves. One landed at my feet, its sewn lips also beginning to unravel. Another whisper, from a different doll. "She never left." A third voice, childlike but wrong. "She's waiting for you." Soon the room filled with whispers, dozens of small voices overlapping, some pleading, some accusing. I covered my ears, but the voices seemed to come from inside my head now. One voice rose above the others, a girl's voice, familiar yet distorted, as if speaking through water. "Daddy, why did you let me die?" I fled down the stairs, slamming the splintered door behind me. But as I leaned against the wall, panting, I felt something in my pocket, something that hadn't been there before. Black thread and a sewing needle, nestled in my palm like a promise. That night, I dreamt of sewing a child's mouth shut while she stared at me with Emma's eyes. The town of Blackwood lies 15 miles from my grandmother's farm, a collection of faded storefronts and tired people that seem to exist outside of time. I drove there 3 days after discovering the attic room, desperate for human contact, for anything that might anchor me to reality. The library was housed in what had once been a church, its stained glass windows depicting not saints but scenes from classic literature. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and furniture polish. A few patrons browsed quietly among the stacks, their footsteps muffled by worn carpet. "Can I help you find something?" The voice came from behind me, soft but clear. I turned to find a woman watching me with curious intensity. She appeared to be in her mid-40s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a severe bun. Her most striking feature was her eyes, one focused directly on me, the other drifting slightly to the left. The effect was unsettling, as if she were simultaneously looking at me and at something just beyond my shoulder. "I'm David Mercer," I said. "My grandmother was Eleanor Mercer. I've inherited her property out on Ridge Road." Something flickered across the woman's face. Recognition, certainly, but also something else. "Concern? Fear?" "Maeve Thorne," she replied, extending her hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her fingers icy against my palm. "I knew your grandmother well. I'm sorry for your loss." There was something peculiar about the way she spoke, a subtle rhythm to her words that felt almost like an incantation. Each sentence ended with a slight upward lilt, as if everything she said were a question seeking confirmation. "I'm researching local history," I lied, "particularly folklore. My grandmother's house has some unusual features I'm trying to understand." Maeve's wandering eye seemed to fix on me then, aligning briefly with her other eye in a moment of perfect focus that sent a chill through me. "You've found the dolls," she said. Not a question this time. I nodded, unsure how to respond. "Come with me." She led me to a small room in the back of the library, unlocking it with a key she wore around her neck. Inside was a collection of local historical documents, photographs, and artifacts preserved in glass cases. "Blackwood has always been a place of passage," Maeve explained, pulling out a folder of yellowed newspaper clippings. "Not just for the living, but for those caught between states of being." She spread the clippings on a table. Headlines from the 1890s described a witch hunt that had resulted in the lynching of a local midwife named Mara Blackwood. "No relation to the town," she explained, though the coincidence of names had always struck her as significant. "Mara was skilled in what some called the old ways," Maeve continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "She helped women in childbirth, But she also helped those whose children were born wrong, or those who died before their time. Wrong how? I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Hollow, Maeve replied, that strange lilt returning to her voice. Some souls aren't fully formed when they enter this world, and some souls refuse to leave when their bodies fail. Mara found ways to preserve what remained, to keep them from being lost entirely. She showed me a faded photograph of a woman standing before a farmhouse I recognized immediately as my grandmother's property. The woman wore a long black dress, her face partially obscured by shadow. At her feet sat several small children, their faces blurred in the old photograph, and beside them, a collection of dolls. Soul vessels, Maeve said, tapping the image of the dolls. Mara could bind a departing soul to an object, usually a doll crafted in the child's likeness. The thread that seals their lips keeps the soul from escaping. I thought of the dolls in the attic, their mouths stitched shut with black thread. That's just superstition, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Grief changes people, Maeve continued as if I hadn't spoken. It changes magic too, bends it like heat bends metal. White magic becomes black when tainted by too much sorrow. Preservation becomes possession. Protection becomes imprisonment. She leaned closer, close enough that I could smell the lavender sachets she kept in her clothing. Your grandmother knew this. She tried to contain what Mara had started. The dolls should not be disturbed, David. Whatever you do, don't break the seals. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Maeve's wandering eye drifted back to alignment with the other. Because I knew your daughter. Ice flooded my veins. That's not possible. Emma never left Toronto. She was born there. She died there. We never came here. Not in life, Maeve agreed. But death is a journey, not a destination. Sometimes the dead get redirected. She reached into her desk drawer and removed an old leather-bound book, its cover unmarked except for a symbol that matched one I'd seen carved into my grandmother's floorboards. If you hear singing at night, don't answer, she warned, pressing the book into my hands. If you find new dolls appearing, don't touch them, and whatever you do, don't let them speak to you in your daughter's voice. It's not her. It's what wants to be her. As I drove back to the farmhouse, the book sat heavy on the passenger seat beside me. I felt watched, though the rural road was empty for miles in every direction. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see small faces peering back at me from the back seat. At home, I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and opened the book Maeve had given me. Most of it was written in a language I didn't recognize, but some pages had been translated into English in a cramped hand I now recognized as my grandmother's writing. The living ghost. One passage read, "Eastborn through grief. It comes when a soul refuses its journey and instead attaches to the living. It feeds on sorrow until it grows strong enough to take what it desires. A new vessel, a new life. The binding ritual can trap such spirits, but the cost is high. For every soul contained, another must eventually be offered." I was still reading when my phone rang. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered. Silence on the line, then a soft breath. "Hello?" I repeated. "Who is this?" Child's laugh. Faint but unmistakable. "Daddy," Emma's voice said. "I'm coming home soon." The line went dead. Later that evening, I returned to the library to confront Maeve with questions the book had raised. The building was dark, closed hours ago according to the sign on the door. But as I turned to leave, I glimpsed movement through one of the stained glass windows, a figure moving among the bookshelves. I circled to the back entrance and found it unlocked. Inside, the library was transformed by moonlight, filtering through the colored glass, casting prismatic shadows across the floor. I followed the sound of shuffling pages to Maeve's office. She sat at her desk, illuminated by a single lamp, poring over a stack of old photographs. I recognized them immediately. They were pictures of my family, my parents, My grandmother. Emma. Me. How did you get these? I demanded from the doorway. Maeve didn't startle. She looked up slowly, as if she'd been expecting me. Both eyes fixed on me perfectly this time. Your grandmother sent them to me, she said. She knew what was coming. She pushed one photograph toward me. It showed my grandmother in her youth, standing beside a dark-haired woman holding an infant. The dark-haired woman was unmistakably Maeve, not a relative, not a look-alike, but Maeve herself. Unchanged. Unaged. That's not possible, I whispered. This photo is from 1954. Time moves differently for some of us, Maeve replied. That strange lilt gone from her voice now, especially those who've made certain arrangements. In the reflection of the window behind her desk, I could see Maeve's face illuminated by the desk lamp. But in that reflection, her eyes glowed red like dying embers. What are you? I asked, backing toward the door. Maeve smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous, too sharp in the dim light. I'm a friend, David. Perhaps the only one who can help you now. Help me with what? With what's coming. She closed the photo album gently. We never really die, David. Not if we're careful. Not if we plan ahead. I left without the answers I came for, but with a growing sense that the truth was far worse than the ghost stories and folk magic I'd initially suspected. Whatever haunted my grandmother's house wasn't just a restless spirit or a manifestation of my grief. It was something older, something patient, something that had been waiting for me specifically. And somehow, Maeve was part of it. I began sleeping with a knife under my pillow after my encounter with Maeve. Not that steel would protect me from whatever dwelled in the farmhouse, but its solid weight beneath my hand provided some small comfort in the dark hours when the walls seemed to breathe around me. Sleep became a rare visitor, replaced by a half-waking state where dreams bled into reality. I'd catch myself standing in strange parts of the house with no memory of how I got there, at the foot of the attic stairs, or before the bathroom mirror, or beside the empty crib in what I now thought of as Emma's room, though she had never set foot in this house. The first time I woke up with unexplained injuries, I blamed it on sleepwalking. 4 parallel scratches across my chest, not deep but precise, as if someone had dragged their nails across my skin with deliberate care. The second time, the wounds formed a pattern, a crude symbol that matched one from Maeve's book, a sigil meant to prepare the vessel. I began recording myself at night, setting up my phone to capture video of my bedroom as I slept. Most mornings, the recordings showed nothing unusual, just me, tossing restlessly or lying still as death for hours at a time. Until the night I didn't appear in the footage at all. The video showed my empty bed from midnight until 4:17 a.m., when my body suddenly reappeared beneath the covers, as if I'd been there all along. The camera hadn't malfunctioned. The timestamp continued uninterrupted. I had simply not been there. Where had I gone? And how had I returned without triggering the camera's motion detection? I set up audio recorders throughout the house the next night. One in the bedroom, one in the hallway, one in the hallway, one in the attic room, and one in the kitchen. In the morning, I played them back with trembling hands. The bedroom recorder captured my breathing, deep and regular, punctuated by occasional mumbling normally sleep sounds. The kitchen recorder caught nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional settling of the old house. The hallway recording contained footsteps, light, shuffling steps that moved from my bedroom door toward the attic stairs around 2 a.m. They didn't return, but it was the attic recording that turned my blood to ice. It began with the creak of the door opening, footsteps crossing the floor, the rustle of fabric, then my voice, but not my voice, higher pitched, with the lilting cadence of a young child. One by one they all come back, sang the voice. Piece by piece, they all come back. The sound of small objects being moved. Dolls, I assumed. Daddy doesn't know yet, continued the child's voice, my voice. But he's almost ready, almost empty enough inside. a sound like scissors cutting thread. This one's eyes for seeing, this one's ears for hearing, this one's mouth for speaking all the pretty words. More rustling than a low humming, the lullaby again, the one my grandmother used to sing. Then my adult voice returned, but slurred and strange, as if I were speaking while deeply asleep. "Who's there? What are you doing to me?" The child voice giggled. "Silly daddy, I'm not doing anything to you. I'm doing something with you. Your skin fits me better than the dolls do. Soon I won't need them at all." The recording ended with a final statement, clear and chilling. "Daddy, your skin fits me better." I played the recording 4 times, my horror growing with each repetition. It was my voice, unmistakably mine, but transformed into something childlike and wrong. The implications were too terrible to contemplate. Something was using my body while I slept. I called Lena that afternoon, desperate to hear a rational voice. She answered on the 4th ring, her tone immediately suspicious. "David, what's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied. I found some old recordings of Emma, from the hospital. I thought you might want them." A long pause. "That's not funny, David." "What do you mean?" "We never recorded her at the hospital." Lena's voice had hardened. "You know that. The doctors wouldn't allow it during the procedures, and afterward she couldn't speak anymore." My free hand tightened around the phone. "That's not true. She spoke to me the night before she died. She said she was scared of the dark." "No, David." Lena's voice softened with pity. "Emma was in a coma for the last week. She never regained consciousness. The doctors explained this to us both." I heard her, I insisted, panic rising in my throat. "She spoke to me. This is why I left," Lena said quietly. "You created memories that never happened. You refused to accept reality. Please, David, get help." She hung up, leaving me with the terrible weight of doubt. Had I imagined Emma's final words? Had I been so desperate for closure that I'd fabricated a conversation that never occurred? Or was something else at work? Something that had begun long before I moved into my grandmother's house. That night, I searched the entire house for a recorder, a hidden speaker, anything that could explain the voices I'd been hearing. I found nothing. But in Emma's room, sitting in the center of the crib where I was certain nothing had been before, was a small cassette recorder, the kind that hadn't been manufactured in decades. I pressed play. My own voice emerged from the speaker, but with that same childlike quality from the attic recording. "Daddy is nothing but a hollow thing now. Just a shell. Just a skin for me to wear." Then my normal voice. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The child voice giggled. "You invited me in, Daddy. The night she died. You said, 'Take me instead,' and I will take you." The recording ended with a final line that made my skin crawl with recognition. Words I had indeed spoken at Emma's bedside during those final hours. Words I thought no one else had heard. "I would give anything to take your place." Without warning, the recorder began playing again, though I hadn't touched any buttons. This time, it was Emma's voice, the one I'd begun to fear I had imagined. "Daddy," she said, "your skin fits me better." I smashed the recorder against the wall, plastic and circuitry shattering across the floor. In the sudden silence that followed, I heard something else, the soft patter of bare feet on the wooden floor behind me. I turned slowly, already knowing what I would find. Nothing. No one. Just an empty room and the broken pieces of the recorder. But in the mirror hanging on the wall, my reflection smiled with a child's gleeful malice, though my own face remained frozen in terror. The dreams began the night after I destroyed the recorder. Vivid, suffocating dreams where I was no longer a man of 31 but a child of perhaps 5 or 6, being carried in the arms of a woman whose face I couldn't see. Her grip was too tight, her nails digging into my skin as she whispered about things I couldn't quite hear. In the dream, we approached a stone well behind a farmhouse, my grandmother's farmhouse, though it looked newer. the paint fresh and white in the moonlight. The woman held me over the well's edge, and I could feel the cool breath of damp air rising from the darkness below. "Please," I begged in a child's voice. "I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." "It's too late for that," the woman replied, her voice distorted as if speaking through water. "Some children are born wrong, born hollow. You should never have been mine." Then she released me, and I was falling, tumbling through darkness toward the sound of weeping that echoed from the well's bottom. The impact never came in the dream. I always woke just before hitting the water, gasping and drenched in sweat so cold it felt like pond water. The third time the dream came, something changed. As I fell, a small hand reached out from the well wall, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. A child's face emerged from a crevice in the stone, a little girl with Emma's features, but wrong somehow, her eyes too dark, her smile too wide. "I'll catch you, Daddy," she said, "like you never caught me." I woke up soaking wet, not with sweat this time, but with actual water that smelled of algae and earth, as if I'd been submerged in a pond. My sheets were soaked. My hair dripped onto the pillowcase. The clock read 3:17 a.m. Outside, rain fell in sheets, drumming against the windows. I hadn't slept outside. My bedroom door was still locked from the inside. Yet I was drenched to the skin with water that tasted of minerals when I touched it to my lips. Well, water. The farmhouse had always used a natural spring for its water supply. Not as well. At least, that's what my grandmother told me during my childhood visits. But the dream felt too specific, too real to be mere imagination. The next morning, I explored the property in the gray light of a rainy day. The barn stood 100 yards from the main house, its red paint peeling to reveal weathered wood beneath. Inside, farm equipment lay covered in dust and cobwebs. A tractor from the 1950s, hand tools hanging on the walls, bales of hay long since turned to compost. At the back of the barn, behind a stack of rotting lumber, I found a door I hadn't noticed during my initial exploration of the property. It led to a small stone root cellar, the air inside cool and damp. Shelves lined the walls, still holding ancient, preserved fruits in glass jars, their contents dark and unidentifiable after decades of abandonment. Something about the dimensions of the room felt wrong. The exterior of the structure had suggested a larger space than what I now stood in. I knelt, running my hands along the rough stone floor until I found what I was looking for. A metal ring nearly invisible beneath years of dirt. It took all my strength to pull up the trapdoor, its hinges screaming in protest. Below, a narrow shaft ascended into darkness, with iron rungs embedded in the wall forming a ladder. The smell that rose from the opening was the same as in my dream. Dank, mineral-rich, primordial. I returned to the house for a flashlight and rope, though some part of me knew I was being drawn into something I shouldn't disturb. Back at the cellar, I secured the rope to a sturdy beam, tied the other end around my waist, and began the descent into the shaft, the beam of my flashlight barely penetrating the darkness below. The climb down was longer than I expected, at least 30 feet. The walls were smooth stone, slick with moisture. Eventually, my feet touched solid ground, and I found myself in a small circular chamber carved from the bedrock. At its center was a well, a perfect circle of darkness, its stone rim worn smoothly by countless hands. This was the well from my dreams, hidden away, forgotten by time. But someone has been here recently. Fresh footprints marked the damp earth, small footprints, like a child's, circling the well in a pattern that resembled the symbols from Maeve's book. I approached the well cautiously, playing with my flashlight beam across its surface. The water below was black and still, a perfect mirror reflecting my face when I leaned over to look. Except, the reflection showed not just my face, but another face behind me. A child with hollow eyes and a stitched mouth. I spun around. Empty darkness. When I turned back to the well, something broke the water's surface. A small hand, reaching upward before disappearing again with a quiet splash. Without thinking, I reached into the frigid water. My fingers closed around something hard and smooth. I pulled it out, water streaming between my fingers. A tooth. A child's tooth, perfectly white, and far too fresh to have been in that well for long. As I stared at it, the beam of my flashlight caught something else gleaming beneath the water. I reached again, deeper this time, the water nearly to my shoulder. My fingers brushed against a familiar shaped delicate chain, a small heart-shaped locket. The same locket I had given Emma on her 3rd birthday. The same locket I had seen around the neck of the doll in the attic. I pulled it out, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it back into the dark water. The locket was tarnished but intact. I clipped it open. Empty. The lock of hair was gone. Something moved in the water below. A shadow, larger than before. The surface began to ripple, though there was no breeze in the underground chamber. A soft sound echoed up from the depths, a child's laughter, distorted by water and stone. Then a voice, Emma's voice, rising from the well-like mist. "Found you, Daddy." I scrambled back from the well's edge, clutching the locket and tooth in my fist. As I retreated, my flashlight beam swept across the wall of the chamber, illuminating what I had missed upon entering. Drawings, hundreds of them etched into the stone. Crude childish figures with stitched mouths. A larger figure labeled Daddy, and repeated over and over, the symbol I had found scratched into my chest after my sleepwalking episode. Above them all, carved more deeply than the rest, a single sentence: "The vessel is almost ready." I fled, climbing the ladder with reckless speed, the rope forgotten in my panic. At the top, I slammed the trapdoor shut and dragged several heavy objects on top of it, though I knew in my heart that whatever dwelled in the well wouldn't be contained by physical barriers. That night, I called Maeve from the relative safety of my kitchen, the windows and doors locked and lined with salt, as her book had instructed. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting for my call. "You found the well," she said. "Not a question. What lives down there?" I demanded. "What is happening to me?" A long pause. "Not what, who?" Her voice had lost its strange lilt, becoming flat and precise. "Come to the library tomorrow at midnight. I'll show you." "Tell me now." "The explanation requires demonstration," Maeve replied. "Things you need to see with your own eyes. But I can tell you this much. The well is where it began. Where Mara Blackwood bound the first hollow child. Where your grandmother tried to contain what she had unleashed. Where your Emma's spirit was drawn, like calls to light." "Emma wasn't hollow," I protested, though an icy doubt had taken root in my chest. "She was perfect. Perfect on the outside," Maeve agreed. "But inside, didn't you ever wonder why she never cried? Why did she watch you with such ancient eyes? Some children are born as vessels, David. Empty spaces waiting to be filled." I thought of Emma's unnervingly quiet infancy. How she had rarely cried, rarely demanded attention like other babies. How she would sometimes stare at nothing for hours, her expression one of concentration rather than the vacant gaze of an infant. Lena had been delighted by her easy temperament. I had been unsettled. "That's ridiculous," I said, but my protest sounded hollow even to my own ears. "The tooth," Maeve continued as if I hadn't spoken. "The one you found in the well. It's fresh, isn't it? New. But Emma has been dead for 2 years." My fingers closed around the tooth in my pocket. "How did you know about the tooth?" "Because it's happening again," Maeve said softly. "The rebirth. The return. She's building herself a new body, piece by piece. And you, David, you're giving her exactly what she needs." The line went dead. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows like bony fingers trying to get in. I didn't go to the library at midnight. Instead, I drove into Blackwood early the next morning and parked outside the small brick building, watching as townsfolk came and went with their books and newspapers. Maeve arrived precisely at 9, dressed in a severe black dress that looked more appropriate for the 1950s than the present day. She moved with an odd, gliding gait, as if her feet barely touched the ground. I waited until she was inside before approaching the library. The morning sunlight felt reassuring on my skin, a reminder that not all the world existed in shadow and whispers. Inside, the library was quiet, except for the soft clicking of Maeve's heels as she moved among the stacks, reshelving books. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "I thought you might come in daylight," she said, her wandering eye focusing on something over my shoulder. "Safer that way. Smarter." "I need answers," I said, keeping my voice low. "Real ones, not more cryptic warnings or folklore." Maeve nodded once, sharply. "Follow me." She led me past the special collections room to a door marked staff only. Beyond it, a narrow staircase descended into darkness. Maeve flicked a switch at the top of the stairs, illuminating a bare bulb that cast harsh shadows across the walls. "The library was built on the foundation of the original town hall," she explained as we descended, "where they held the trial of Mara Blackwood in 1890. The basement was larger than I expected, the stone walls covered in bookshelves that sagged under the weight of ancient leather-bound volumes. In the center of the room stood a large oak table, its surface scarred and stained. On the table lay a book, larger than the others, its cover made not of leather, but what looked disturbingly like pale, tanned human skin. "Mara's grimoire," Maeve said, laying her hand reverently on the cover. "The original, not the copy I gave you." "How do you have this?" I asked, keeping my distance from the unsettling object. "I was her apprentice," Maeve replied simply. I stared at her, trying to process the impossibility of her statement. "That's not possible. That was over 130 years ago." Maeve smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too small, too numerous in her mouth. "I told you, time moves differently for some of us, especially those who've made certain arrangements." She opened the grimoire carefully, turning pages filled with cramped writing and disturbing illustrations until she reached what she was looking for. The page showed a detailed drawing of a human figure with various body parts labeled in a language I didn't recognize. Inside each body part were tiny symbols that matched the ones I had found carved into my grandmother's floorboards. "The ritual of rebirth," Maeve explained. "A soul that has been properly prepared can return to the living world, but it needs a vessel. Usually, this is accomplished through birth. The hollow child is born, and the waiting soul enters it. But sometimes when the need is great enough, a more direct approach is required." She turned another page. This one showed a series of drawings. A doll with a stitched mouth, and a human figure with its chest cavity open to reveal not organs but countless tiny dolls. "Mara discovered that grief tears holes between worlds," Maeve continued. "A grieving parent is the perfect conduit for a returning soul. Their desire to reclaim what was lost creates a doorway. All that's needed then is to widen that doorway until the soul can fully manifest." "You're talking about Emma," I said, my throat tightening. "You're saying something is using my grief over her death to come back?" Maeve's wandering eye fixed on me with unnerving intensity. "Not something, David. Her, at least, what you believe to be her." She turned another page in the grimoire. This one contained a list of names written in various hands, dozens of them, dating back to the 1890s. At the very bottom, in fresh ink that still glistened wetly on the page, was a name that made my blood freeze in my veins. Emma Mercer. And below it another name, my own. "The lineage of vessels," Maeve explained. "Each hollow child who received a returning soul, and each sacrifice who made it possible." "I don't understand," I whispered, though a terrible suspicion was forming in my mind. "Your grandmother was Mara's daughter," Maeve said. "She inherited certain responsibilities, certain powers, as you did, though you never knew it. Your daughter Emma wasn't just a child, David. She was born hollow, a perfect vessel. But something went wrong with the binding ritual. The returning soul was too powerful, too hungry. It consumed her from within. It consumed her from within." That's insane, I protested. Emma died of leukemia, a rare, aggressive form. The doctors explained everything. Did they explain why her blood turned black in the final stages? Maeve asked quietly. Did they explain the symbols that appeared on her skin? Symbols they dismissed as unusual bruising patterns? Did they explain why, in her final hours, she spoke in a voice that wasn't her own? My hands began to shake as suppressed memories surfaced, the strange darkening of Emma's blood that the doctors had been unable to explain, the odd marks on her skin that had appeared overnight, marks that resembled the symbols in Mara's grimoire, the way her voice had deepened and distorted the night before she died, speaking words no 4-year-old should know. You're saying something possessed my daughter, killed her from the inside? No, David, Maeve said gently. I'm saying your daughter was never really there to begin with. The vessel was flawed, the binding incomplete. What lived inside that small body was only partially your Emma. The rest was older, much older. I felt sick, my world tilting on its axis. Why are you telling me this? What does it have to do with what's happening at the farmhouse? Because it's trying again, Maeve replied, turning to the final page of the grimoire. And this time, it's chosen you as the vessel. The page contained a single line of text, written in what looked like fresh blood. David Mercer will be the last vessel. As I stared at my name, the blood seemed to pulse with its own inner light, as if still alive somehow. Maeve closed the grimoire carefully. The dolls are anchors, she explained. Each one contains a fragment of the returning soul. As they come undone, those fragments are released. They need a new home, David. They've chosen yours. How do I stop it? I demanded. You can't, Maeve said simply. Not anymore. It's already inside you. Has been since the night Emma died, and you wish to take her place. All you can do now is choose how it ends. She reached into a drawer beneath the table and removed a small wooden box. Inside lay a doll unlike the others I'd seen. This one made of what looked like human hair woven into a crude humanoid shape, with teeth embedded where eyes should be, and a mouth stitched shut with red thread rather than black. This can bind it, Maeve said. Trap it inside something other than yourself. But the cost is high, a soul for a soul. What does that mean? It means someone must take their place in the well, she replied. The balance must be maintained, a life for a life. I left the library with the hair doll wrapped in cloth and hidden in my jacket, Maeve's final warning echoing in my ears. It will be strongest at the new moon, 3 days from now. That's when it will try to complete the transformation. That's when you'll need to be ready. The farmhouse felt different when I returned, the air heavier, charged with a palpable energy that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I went directly to the attic room, no longer afraid of what waited there. The dolls watched me with their glass eyes as I searched the room, looking for something Maeve had described, Mara's original grimoire, which my grandmother had supposedly hidden somewhere in the house. I found it beneath a loose floorboard wrapped in oilcloth that had preserved it remarkably well over the decades. Unlike the copy in the library basement, this book was smaller, its leather cover unmarked except for a small symbol pressed into the spine. The same symbol I'd found scratched into my chest after sleepwalking. The pages were brittle but legible, filled with the same cramped handwriting as the copy, though this version contained passages that had been omitted from Maeve's book. Passages that described not just the binding ritual, but its purpose, to feed the entity in the well, to strengthen it until it could fully manifest in our world. The final entry, dated just days before Mara's execution, described her ultimate plan. The child will be born in the 7th generation of my blood. A perfect vessel, born hollow and waiting. When that child dies before its time, the doorway will open fully. What waits beyond will enter our world, not as a fragment, not as a whisper, but in its true and terrible form. Beneath this, in different handwriting that I recognized as my grandmother's, the child has been born. God help us all. Emma had been the 7th generation since Mara Blackwood. I closed the grimoire. A cold certainty settled in my bones. I wasn't fighting against my daughter's restless spirit. I was being used as a conduit for something far older, something that had orchestrated events across generations to reach this point, something that had waited in the dark for over a century. That night, I dreamt of the well again. But this time, as I fell through the darkness, the water below transformed into thousands of tiny grasping hands. They caught me, covered me, pulled me into their embrace, and as I sank beneath their touch, I saw my reflection in the black water, little girl with hollow eyes in my daughter's face, smiling with too many teeth. "Almost all time, Daddy," she whispered with my voice. "Almost time to let me in." I didn't sleep last night. I couldn't. Not after what I'd seen in the mirror, a face that wasn't mine staring back. My reflection smiled when I frowned. The farmhouse seemed different this morning. Warmer, like it was alive and breathing around me. I could feel eyes on me from every corner. Not just the dolls anymore, but the walls themselves. The floorboards creaked in rhythm with my heartbeat. I decided to confront Maeve. She knew more than she was telling me. The library was empty when I arrived, except for her. Of course it was. This town barely existed anymore. Just old buildings and older secrets. "I need answers," I said, dropping my grandmother's photograph on her desk. "Why do you look the same in this picture from 60 years ago?" Maeve didn't flinch. She just closed the book she was reading and smiled, that strange half-smile that never reached her eyes. "David, you're becoming unstable. Let me help you." Her voice was honey over broken glass. "Stop lying to me." My shout echoed through the empty library. When the echo faded, I noticed the silence. Absolute silence. No birds outside. No hum of lights. Just Maeve's soft breathing. "Come to the house tonight," she finally said. "I'll show you everything." I should have run. I should have driven away from this cursed town and never looked back. But grief makes you reckless. Grief makes you desperate for answers, even terrible ones. The sun was setting when Maeve arrived. She carried a small leather bag that smelled of herbs and iron. Without asking, she walked straight to the attic stairs, like she'd been here 1,000 times before. "What are you doing?" I asked, following her up. The nursery looked different in the fading light. The dolls seemed eager, leaning forward on their shelves. "Saving you," Maeve said simply, removing items from her bag. Red thread, small scissors, a bone needle, and what looked horrifyingly like a dried human finger. I backed away. "What the hell is that?" "Your grandmother's. She left it for this purpose." Before I could stop her, Maeve began chanting in a language I'd never heard, all harsh consonants and guttural stops. She threw the needle with the red thread and approached one of the dolls. "This is a binding ritual," she explained between verses. "It's to stop you from becoming the girl." "What girl?" I demanded, though somewhere deep down I already knew. "Your daughter. She's trying to come back through you. Grief is a doorway, David, and you've left yours wide open." I lunged to stop her, but something invisible held me in place. The air thickened, pressing against my skin like cold hands. Maeve pierced the doll's lips with the needle, sewing them shut with practiced precision. With each stitch, I felt a burning sensation across my own mouth. "You're hurting me," I tried to say, but my words came out slurred, my tongue suddenly too big for my mouth. "Look," she whispered, pointing to the antique mirror in the corner. I didn't want to. God help me, I didn't want to see. But my head turned anyway. In the reflection stood a little girl where I should have been. She wore a white nightgown stained with dark patches. Her eyes were hollow black pits, her skin gray and translucent. She smiled with my mouth, revealing teeth too small, too sharp. "Daddy," the reflection said, but my lips didn't move. I screamed then, a sound so primal it didn't seem human. Blood trickled from the corners of my mouth where an invisible thread pulled tight. "It's too late," Maeve said, backing away. "You're already becoming her." She dropped the needle and ran, leaving me alone with my reflection. But I wasn't alone. Not really. I could feel her inside me now, tiny hands pressing against my skin from within, trying to break through. The reflection giggled, and I felt my face stretch into a smile that wasn't mine. 3 days had passed since Maeve fled. I think it's been 3 days. Time moves strangely now. Sometimes fast, sometimes agonizingly slow, sometimes not at all. I found myself holding matches, standing before the dolls. I don't remember deciding to burn them. But there I was, flame flickering between my fingers, the smell of sulfur sharp in my nostrils. "It has to end," I whispered, my voice higher than it should be. "All of it." The first doll caught quickly. Its glazed porcelain faces blackened and cracked. The others seemed to scream silently as flames licked their fabric bodies. The smell was awful. Not just burning cloth, but something underneath. Something like burning hair and rotting meat. Fire spread across the wooden shelves, hungry and eager. I should have been afraid, but I felt only relief. Cleansing. Freedom. I moved through the house with a strange calm, touching matches to curtains, to furniture, to my grandmother's old books. The farmhouse had been standing for over a century. By morning, it will be ashes. Outside, the night air was cold against my fevered skin. I watched from the yard as orange flames consumed the attic, spreading downward like roots growing in reverse. That's when I heard a child crying from inside the burning house. My daughter's cry. I knew it was impossible. I knew it was a trap, but I ran back inside anyway. The heat was tremendous, the smoke blinding. But somehow I found myself in a room that wasn't burning. A room that didn't exist. It was a nursery, not the doll-filled attic, but a real nursery with pale yellow walls and a white crib. And in that crib, "Daddy's here," I heard myself say, reaching down with trembling hands. My baby girl looked up at me with clear blue eyes. Healthy. Alive. Perfect. She wrapped her tiny fingers around my thumb. "This isn't real," I whispered, even as tears streamed down my face. "You're not real." "Does it matter?" asked a voice behind me. I turned to find Maeve standing there, but different, younger, her hair dark and flowing. The Maeve from the photograph. "She can be yours again," she said softly. "You can have your family back, your happiness." Outside the nursery window, I could see my ex-wife Lena watering flowers in a garden that had never existed. She looked up and waved, smiling with love in her eyes. Everything I'd lost, everything I'd ever wanted. "What's the price?" I asked, already knowing there would be one. Maeve, or whatever she truly was, just smiled. "Nothing you haven't already paid. Grief is the currency, and you're rich with it." I looked down at my daughter again. She giggled, reaching for me. "All you have to do," Maeve continued, "is let go of who you were. Become who you're meant to be." I felt it then, the seams of my identity loosening, myself unraveling like a sweater caught on a nail. It didn't hurt. It felt like relief. "Daddy's gone now," I heard myself say, but the voice wasn't mine. It was high-pitched, childlike. I don't know who I am anymore. When I look in mirrors, I see fragments, sometimes David, sometimes the little girl, sometimes faces I don't recognize. The farmhouse never burned. It stands as it always has, though now it feels like home in a way it never did before. Maeve visits often, bringing sweets and new dresses. She calls me by different names each time. Sometimes I answer them all. The dolls are back on their shelves, their stitched mouths now smiling. I talk to them at night, and they talk back in voices thin as paper. I know I should be afraid. I know something terrible has happened to me, but all I feel is strange contentment, like finally putting down a heavy suitcase after carrying it for miles. Yesterday, a family drove up to look at the supposedly abandoned property. I watched from the window as their little boy pointed up at me, his eyes wide. His parents saw nothing. I waved to him. He waved back. He'll be visiting soon. They always do, the ones who can see us. The lonely ones. The grieving ones. After all, this house has so many rooms, and I have so many faces to share. We never really die here. Not if we're careful.